Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael MacBride. I'm joined by our dynamic duo of psychologists.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride. Good morning, Dan. I'm so
Morning.
glad you're here with me this morning. This is Dan Kessler. He is a clinical psychologist and my business partner. Welcome.
Hi, hi. Today we're gonna go back to exploring the internet and trying to figure out who's the asshole. I love these opportunities to kind of use these questions as a jumping off point for talking about some of the really fascinating and important issues in relationships. Michael, thank you so much for bringing us yet another opportunity to really explore psychological stuff through the lens of these questions. So
You often call them
take us away.
conundrums. They're common conundrums.
Common conundrums. Michael, take us away.
Yeah, well, thanks both of you. Welcome. Good morning. As always on these Sundays, I enjoy this as well. I know you guys talk about how much time or how much you enjoy the chat. I thoroughly enjoy it. It's always fun to hear what you guys come up with. So, for any of the newbies out there, if you don't know what Am I the Asshole is, in short, someone on the internet has posted a scenario and asked readers, who's the asshole here? And that's what Doctors MacBride and Kessler are hoping to help us determine. If there's any identifiable information in the posts, I've changed that and made it a little more discreet. And if you're new, you should also know to stick around through the credits. We always have a bonus conversation. I can see their gears turning right now, trying to figure out what they might ask one another.
Yeah, that's usually a surprise too. We try not to plan this out too much. We just want you to have a little bit of a window into how we have these conversations. We want them to be natural and organic and frankly just want you to be a part of them.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, neither Dan nor Gail have seen this. Speaking of being spontaneous and organic. So let's go. Today's prompt is, am I the asshole for kicking my parent out of my house and saying, this is why I was so fucked up as a kid?
Michael broke.
You know, I want to immediately say no, but like we probably should hear the facts.
Oh, I like this. Here's some controversy. I'm going to say yes. There is nothing good that can come of throwing an accusation bomb and then walking out.
I think there are times I think there are times when someone recognizes that, like, you know what, I've tried to maintain a relationship with a toxic family of origin or toxic parents long enough, and I'm just not willing to do it anymore. You're right. I think being vindictive is generally speaking not good, but there's a part of me is like, oh yeah.
There's a part of all of us that's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, so
it doesn't get you anywhere in the long run, but let's hear the details.
I'm gonna agree with you in general. Being vindictive doesn't get you anywhere in the long run. I'm really interested in hearing the fact pattern here with the awareness that we're hearing one side. We're hearing the side of the person who thinks their parents are assholes, and may or may not be realistic or rational about it. So I'm already moving on my position, which I came up with without actually hearing the facts. Michael, would you share with us the actual facts of the story?
Sure. So this is what you got. Over the weekend, I had my parents over for dinner, and my 10-year-old daughter wanted to play a song she'd been practicing on her keyboard. She was excited to show us, and while it wasn't perfect, I thought she did a great job. As soon as she finished, I started clapping, but my parents, they started laughing. Not a little chuckle, but full-on belly laughing. My mom asked if it was her first time playing, and my dad actually said a dog could have played it better. I watched my daughter's face fall, and she said quietly that she had had 2 lessons and that playing with both hands was hard. They just laughed harder. I saw red. I stood up, took their cups, told them to get the hell out of my house. My mother told me that they hadn't finished their drinks yet and that they wanted to hear another song, but I wasn't having it. I told them to get their stuff and get the fuck out. My dad huffed, and my mom had the nerve to say I was being too sensitive and that I can't protect her from the real world. I shot back that this wasn't preparing her, it was just them being bullies, the same reason I was so messed up growing up. They finally left, and I sat down with my daughter and told her how proud I was and asked her to play it again. She did, and I I made sure she knew that she did great. After they left, I texted my parents and said, we're taking a break until they can act like decent people. My dad replied he didn't raise me to be so precious. Then my sister called, doing her usual brown nosing routine, telling me I was out of line and coddling my kid. I told her to fuck herself and hung up. Who's the asshole here?
Okay. So,
Okay, so we're just going to roll back a few minutes.
well, because
Was I
my
right?
fact pattern was that he stormed out and saying horrible things about our childhood. But if the
On pause.
conversation went,
Michael, do we have a gender on OP here? If we don't, that's fine. I just want to.
Father. It does say.
oh, this is dad. Oh,
This is
okay.
dad. Okay.
Okay. I made a gendered assumption. Thank you for
You
checking me.
did.
I
And I
did.
jumped in because
You didn't hear it the same way. Okay.
All right.
But, okay. So this parent, this father, I had imagined had delivered this information in kind of a different way. The headline is kind of clickbaity in the sense of like, he said, you fucked me up as a kid and I'm out of here. The facts as delivered suggest a bit more rational rolling out of conversation.
I love what I'm right.
And we are limited because OP, it doesn't have anyone else to corroborate how this went down.
Right.
And yet I can totally see this as something that would happen. And in that case, I love that dad stood up for his daughter, right?
Yeah, daughter.
Okay. And her efforts and and that sister, toxic. If you weren't there, you're not a part of this conversation. I agree. Fuck off.
Yeah. Now I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth and say, yeah, I know, big shocker. And say that we are hearing this through his lens, and I am. Frequently that lens has all sorts of things to it that make it not accurate.
Yeah.
However, as described, wow. I mean, kids, and I'm not saying that we should be like always telling kids that they're amazing and wonderful when they're clearly not. But when a 10-year-old is doing something that's really special for a 10-year-old, and yeah, they're going to make mistakes and they're going to do this, like, you celebrate the effort that they put into it, and you recognize that a 10-year-old is a 10-year-old, and you don't have expectations of them to do like brilliant music. They're 10 years old,
right, with 2 lessons.
Yeah, those of us who've had children in band, and I'm going on like 4 children in band, like those early band concerts,
they're awful.
I don't know if
an objective musicality standpoint, they're rough to listen to.
They are. No, they are. They
awesome.
are. They are. And if any of my kids are listening, I loved your band concerts. Those 6th grade band concerts were
special.
Yeah, they were special. No, and they are. And as parents, like, you sit through them, and they're. But you love that your kids are putting the effort into it, and you see you see the progression over the years, from the 6th grade band concerts where your ears are like bleeding and they're painful, but the kids are really putting it all into it, and then you get to see these like advanced band concerts when they're like graduating high school, and the music is beautiful, and like they get there from those early concerts and through the encouragement, and this is a child who, without that encouragement, grandma and grandpa are never going to get to hear that later concert. It's sad. It saddens me to hear this response. It really does.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's a new pattern, and that is problematic. And I think we do a better job now as parents understanding, like you said, we're celebrating effort and not necessarily outcome. And these parents, we're going to put them in a certain cohort, have been taught to celebrate outcome and not effort, right? And so I think we see a shifting in parenting and understanding how you encourage kids without coddling them or telling them they're always right, but you do celebrate that effort. Like, wow, honey, 2 lessons in and you're playing with both hands. That does sound really hard. that enough and alone, that recognition of that effort would make that 10-year-old beam and skip up the stairs toward bedtime. Like,
And
it's not that hard.
you know, we've certainly seen this in situations where a kid has promise in some area,
Mhm.
and a negative parent, a negative coach, someone who isn't supportive and caring, and not in the Pollyannish way,
No.
um, but in the recognition of the work and the recognition of the challenge is in a really but in a positive way.
Mhm.
I mean,
What a missed opportunity for these grandparents.
what a missed opportunity for these parents, or these grandparents rather.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it 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 really is. I mean, as you mentioned early on, I'm not necessarily a fan of going off on people and telling them, you ruined my life, get it out of my out. I just, yeah. at, at the same time, this, I as a dad, like, you go after my kid and make my kid feel like shit when they try hard,
Yeah.
like, you're gonna get you very well might get this reaction.
Mess with the bull, you get the horns.
Yeah, no. I can say, as the psychologist here, well, there may have been a better way to have phrased that to your parents, and there may have been a better way of setting the boundaries. As a dad, I'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I mean, like, sorry,
Yeah,
for the but like, yeah,
this is a challenge. And I remember back, and you probably haven't read the book, but one of the books that I actually just adore. I love, for me, it was Life and Perspective Changing. Like, and I'm really not overstating that. And I really am not. It was one of those books I read, and things just fell into place. Is Brene Brown's Rising Strong. If
oh
you've ever
yeah,
seen my
yeah. No,
copy
I
of
didn't.
it in the office,
Yeah.
it's broken and battered and falls open in places. It's got highlighting and underlining and sticky
Mhm.
notes in it. Like, this is a book that is so meaty and has so much in it. And there's a story that I'm going to maybe paraphrase, and I can link the chapter in the show notes or something, because it's really good. And she's talking about feeling called out and embarrassed in a particular situation. And the way this particular other person calls her out, she then rises to respond. And I remember reading her response. It's the story of Pamela, if anyone's read the book. But again, we'll link it in the show notes. She writes this beautiful email ripping Pamela an absolute new one. And it is a thoughtful, vengeful smackdown in this beautiful way. I mean, this woman just exudes strength and just it's a wonderfully written email, and she has the wisdom to pause before she sends it. I think she shares it with her therapist, who makes a lovely appearance here and there in the book. Her name is Diana, and sits down and shares it, and the therapist disagrees and just takes the wind out of Renee's sails. What do you mean? And and she asked this question that's so wonderful, which is essentially, when you wrote this, how were you hoping that the reader would feel? And Brene says, I wanted her to feel small, like I did. And I was like, oh. So it's a great question to keep in the back of your mind. When you communicate with someone, the words you use and how you want to say them, not only what is it that you want to convey, but how do you want them to feel as you say it?
Sure.
And then choose your words accordingly. Because if your goal is to make your parents feel, 2 inches high, is that really going to produce a result? Is that going to teach them anything? Or is your goal here simply to set a boundary around your daughter? And how do you do that? What language do you need to use to do that firmly and clearly?
Getting back to the story again, as I talk out of both sides of my mouth throughout this podcast, if his goal is to convince his parents that they shouldn't act this way, he's failed.
Because he's kind of bullying them back, really.
Right, because parents essentially say you're being precious and wimpy, and then they calls his sister to badger him too, and it only deepens their commitment to being dicks to kids and grandkids. So that doesn't change their behavior in any way. If anything, it hardens their hearts further
Mhm.
against doing anything positive. If his goal is to end his relationship with his parents, he's potentially gone a good way towards that.
Yeah, yeah, right.
If that's the long-term goal to discontinue the relationship. But if your long-term goal is to discontinue a relationship with someone, you're still, your better choice is to say, I'm choosing not to be in a relationship with you any longer.
Mhm.
I maybe there'll become a day when I'm capable, when I'm ready to.
Mhm.
But these are the things that I want to see before I'm willing to be. And we talked about boundaries. This is a good place
Mhm.
to say, like, boundaries aren't things you tell other people they have to do. Boundaries are things you're saying for yourself.
Right.
So, like, I'm not saying you can't smoke. You smoke all you want, but I won't be around you if you smoke.
Right.
That's my choice. You can be as negative as you want. I won't allow you around my daughter if you're going to be negative. You do you,
Yeah,
but not in my
this
space.
is
You
difficult.
explain this better than I do
No,
sometimes.
that's okay. No, you did a good job. I think it's difficult though when you set up not goals.
Right.
You can't be a dick around my daughter. So how do we measure that? How do we know that's no longer
So
happening?
what would you
So,
set? What would you set here as the goal?
well, first of all,
Give us a positive.
I tell my clients not goals are for dead people and people in comas. They're better at not doing things than we ever are.
Good point.
Right. So then, and I have a weird way of thinking about this. I think about it in the sense of art. If you were in art class, you talk about positive and negative space, something that's not there versus something that's there.
Yes.
Right. So I don't mean positive and negative in terms of good or bad. I just mean the presence of or the absence of something. And so the absence of something, a not goal, is problematic. It's a big old hole. And,
Right.
if
Don't
I
be a
tell
dick
you,
is
yeah, don't be a dick, then how do I know you're not being a dick? It's just the absence of dickishness. But the moment that even the hint of dickishness shows up, we're done. Right. So that
right.
doesn't, it's problematic because we can't really act on that then. And so if we start to think about the presence of something,
Okay.
then what does that look like? And so, we can reestablish a relationship once you and I can have some conversations about what's okay and what's not okay to say to my daughter when she wants to present you with something that she's proud of. Or we can have a conversation once we engage in some family therapy and the therapist agrees that we've made some progress on our communication. Like these are measurable, definable things, a bit more anyway,
right.
than just don't be a dick. Right. Like we need to heal this relationship. This needs to do some work. I
If
need to
dad
feel
wants to heal the
understood
relationship,
by you. If OP wants a relationship.
if dad, yeah, I mean, we don't, there's a reality here. We don't have to have a relationship with our family. We can choose not to. Now, again, if we're choosing not to, I don't know that this is the best way to do it.
No,
Choosing
it's
not to,
definitely not the best way to do it.
no,
And I think we find ourselves in a really interesting time where people are much more free than any other time to say, I'm done. I'm
yeah,
not doing this with you anymore. And then they do cut off family of origin. And I hear in my clinical office a lot of distress around this. And unfortunately, a lot of those times people come in and go, I don't know what I did. I don't understand. And they won't tell me. Now, that may be genuinely true. Maybe they lack insight. Maybe they've never been told. Maybe they've been told a million times and they disagree. But there are times where folks sit in our office and go, I don't understand why this child of mine
yeah,
basically has estranged themselves. And
right,
I have no
right.
power to fix it, which I do find a little problematic. I mean, if you're going to sever that relationship, I'd love to make it
It's,
clear to that person why that relationship has been severed
well,
rather than just doing a piece out of done.
I'm of many conflicting thoughts around this because that there are times when I think it's appropriate to say you're harmful to me and I don't want you in my life. There are times when it's appropriate to say I feel like you've been harmful and I'm willing to have you in my life, but I want to see some changes. And there are times when like you choose to keep someone in your life because our relationships aren't going to be all good.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say we want to keep someone around who's abusive or harmful, but there are times when like we look at the balance of relationships and we can see that this person's going to let us down from time to time around this issue. We talked about this, and it's a bit dangerous. We talk about this in couples relationships. Like, 100% of partners are going to at some point disappoint us.
Yes.
We're going to disappoint our partner.
Yes.
Absolutely. There are going to be times where I'm going
Not
to
100% of the time, but
no,
100%
no, no.
of our
100% of
relationships
partners. Yes,
right,
100% of our partners.
will have
100% of
disappointment existing in them. Just to be clear, I know
disappointment
what you're
exists in
saying.
relationships. Yeah,
Right.
no, disappointment exists in relationships.
Yes.
There are times when we fall. There are going to be times when we fall short of being fully engaged or present or the best partner we can be, and there are times when our partners can do the same. Same thing with parents, and sometimes figuring out the difference between like having been failed or having failed someone and it crossing a line into this is irreparable and the harm to me is greater than any potential benefit. It's hard. Like there's not a. I mean, sometimes there are some bright lines here,
Of course.
but frequently they're not. And where in this gray area do we choose to say, now I'm being harmed too much? Now I'm being not harmed too much. Now the relationship is too damaging.
Yeah. And it is interesting because I often think that as adults, we're willing to tolerate some of that, and you fuck with my kids and we're done. And so, oftentimes those folks who are in my office going, I don't know what happened, they are grandparents, right? And so I do wonder how often something like this has happened. And the parents like, it's one thing for you to hurt me, and it's a total another for you to go after my kid, like you were saying earlier. And
sure.
Peace out.
I think that's exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what happened here. Is dad's been berated by his parents so many times, and he's tolerated. He's put up with it. He's dealt with it, and then the parents berated his daughter.
Yeah.
No.
And, I hope dad took an opportunity to talk about disappointments and how difficult relationships can be and how you weather that. There's an opportunity for the daughter to learn something, albeit it's going to be a hard something.
Yeah.
And it would have been preferable if that never happened for her. And, right, when these things happen, what do you want to do about it? Here are our options. Here are our choices. She's 10. It's not like she gets a choice in whether or not she continues a relationship with her grandparents, but it's also tough because she knows her grandparents and knows they exist. And now what questions does she have? Like, this is a really delicate family situation. And what do you tell your kid now that we're not seeing grandma and grandpa anymore?
And I mean, this, I was thinking the same thing, that this daughter, like, if she loves and wants to spend time with grandma and grandpa, and now to say, well, grandma and grandpa are going to like hurt you by their attitude towards kids and by their negativity, so I'm not going to let you be around them, which is also going to hurt you. Like that's a
10-year-olds have fascinating perspectives on the world, and there's nothing to say that she doesn't say, well, right, but I know grandma and grandpa are this, this, and this, and that maybe she hasn't internalized nearly as much as the father believes she's internalized. Now, maybe it's a pattern over time that he's really concerned about, but like sometimes kids are like, yeah, I know this person's kind of shitty, and I don't pay them a whole lot of mind. That I was doing this piano recital because it was something to do, and conversation was so awkward. Who knows? Like 10-year-olds can be pretty insightful sometimes.
I think with this situation where I maybe take some issue with OP is that this happened without planfulness. Like if you're going to sever a relationship,
don't do it out of anger in the moment.
It should be planful.
Yeah,
it should be well thought out. Like anything, any major thing, when you go off on a person, that's not the place to do it. You have a conversation around it. And, he has some parameters that he wants his parents, I'll be around you and I'll bring my daughter around. But what I need from you is to for her to feel supported. For me to feel like you're supportive of her. And this is what that looks like. So to put it in MacBridean terms, so that it's using the positive space instead of the negative space. Which, his going off and cutting off, I don't know that was a great role modeling for his daughter.
No. I mean, his daughter absolutely says, okay, I know my dad has my back, which is good, but certainly didn't learn how to navigate other than just shut down and stonewall. And then let's pick up the OP's sister for a moment.
Oh yeah, as you mentioned, we don't want to forget the minor characters.
The minor characters we talked about last time. Letting her off the hook would be problematic here. Getting involved in an interaction that you were not present for and does not directly impact you, it's not your business.
No.
So she had no call getting involved in this in any way. It says a couple of things maybe about the dynamics in this relationship, and maybe says what she's afraid of, afraid to piss off these parents, needs to please them. And so, comes in,
Right.
guns a-blazing on her parents' side.
We talk about within relationships and communications, triangles are bad.
Mm.
I say this a lot to people. Triangles are not healthy communication. So now the parents are triangulating in the daughter who is a willful, or the sister who is a willful participant in this triangle communication. She wasn't there, so doesn't know what happened. She doesn't get to, and I think that whether she's correct or incorrect, I mean, let's just for a moment assume that OP is completely off base and misinterpreted everything his parents said and was totally wrong. It's still not okay for the sister to step in.
Okay, so let's massage the facts for a moment. Is it okay? I'm going to challenge you just for a little bit. Is it okay if the sister says, hey, bro, you had mom and dad over the other day for dinner. I heard it ended really badly, and I just want you to think about it for a moment. And I want you to know mom and dad are really hurt by how you're fine with that. But there's still a triangle. She still wasn't there. And
yeah, but she's not, because she's asking him to think about it. She's not telling him what he did was wrong.
Okay. So you're cool with
really
triangle
hurt.
if it's
I would
if it's got rounded edges.
What you're saying is like if she calls up and says, hey, hey, I'm really concerned, like mom and dad really hurt by this thing that happened, and I know that you all have had conflict, and I kind of want to know like what happened. Like I'm hearing from them, but I'm really curious as to what happened. I might be okay with that because she's not coming back and saying you were wrong for what you did.
She's not trying to create a triangle. She's trying to create some unity.
Right. If she's curious,
the relationship between the primary two, not triangulating and creating a third.
If she's truly curious and has question and approaches it this way, maybe there's place for it. The way it's described, calling him up to tell him he's wrong. Yeah, not okay. We also, one of the problems with this whole scenario is we don't know the way it went down. And I'm just like, I'm going to go on a limb here. All right. So as described, parents are assholes and he made some choices that he shouldn't have made. And the sister's an asshole.
Yes.
As described, sister's an asshole.
Parents are assholes, sister's asshole. OP is sucky.
OP made some bad choices here.
Okay. Not mildly dickish, just a little bit sucky.
I mean, he didn't do the right thing here, for sure.
Okay.
Parents are assholes and the sister's an asshole. But you know what? I don't know how, like, all of these are always tinged with my interpretation of what happened. I'm only presenting one side.
And I think I'm right.
Right.
This is why I took the action I did.
I don't know that I want to render a verdict this time.
Because there is no corroborating information that says this is how it went down?
Yeah, there's just there's too much. I see this all the time with people who, person A means X and person B hears Y and gets mad because how dare you say this thing? The person's like, well, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. No, and I think that, our interpretations are a mix of, or what happened is a mix of what happened in our interpretation of that occurrence. And while, if we go with OP's interpretation, yes. Okay. Mom and dad are grandparents are assholes. Sister's an asshole. Mm-hmm. And he's not an asshole. He made some poor choices.
Okay.
But more than some of the other ones we've dealt with, like, I want to see the videotape. Like, I want to see the instant replay of this event. And I want to see if it really was, like, I don't mean to doubt him. And at the same time, like certainly their parents were like this. I kind of want to, I'm curious. This leaves me curious.
I like the curiosity. I like where you're going with this. I agree. As posted, I would go parents and sister, definitely asshole. OP, definitely on the sucky side of things, mostly because of the communication. And even if in my head I use that doubling rule that we sometimes are taught, and I double the level of anger because of the amount of curse language in there, I double it, and I would move that maybe suckiness up to dickishness, or assholeness, just because mildly asshole ish, because I suspect it didn't go down well. It was not planful, and it was from a place of anger instead of productive dynamic change.
Right.
So I think
you're not as
firm.
you're more willing to render a verdict here than I am, which is cool.
A little bit more.
Michael, where'd the internet fall?
Well, you had kind of two. But the interesting thing happened here. So like there was not the asshole, your hero essentially was like that kind of like you did the thing everybody wishes they could do kind of thing. But the minute that you got below the initial response, there was a much more nuanced question about like, yeah, but like really that's not the example you want to set for your daughter. And you should have it's not the time and place to sever a relationship. Like, maybe you needed a timeout and that's fine, but like you need to come back around and have a bigger conversation kind of. So like it was interesting, like people jumping to like, yeah, you did the thing. And then it was like, well, I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. And so it's kind of interesting to see that. And then
interesting how those don't get upvoted quite as much as, yeah, man, go for it.
Well, but this is the reality of such things. Extreme responses are satisfying.
Yeah.
And the more nuanced responses are less exciting and less satisfying and less thrilling. So the sort of extreme things
they're less carried by the algorithm.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
that's part of how we're getting our news
course,
is really through these high impact polarizing responses.
Yeah.
The other big category was everybody sucks here, which openly addressed like, dude, like that might have felt satisfying in the moment, but like that wasn't the way to react. And the parents definitely should not have responded that way. And the sister really sucks. And then some people jokingly said, and the daughter needs lessons, and then said, too soon?
Soon. She's only at 2. She's in lessons.
She's
Back up the daughter. She's 10.
I know. I thought it was funny. And then the other kind of interesting thing that was definitely a minority in there, but some people said, I'm calling bullshit on this. This is what you wish you had said, but there's no way this went down this way, which I was like, whoa, that's kind of interesting to think about.
And we do assume, we assume that we assume that these are actual stories that people actually had happen. I mean, some of this shit, undoubtedly, in our 40-something episodes we've done so far, at least one of those was something that someone just wrote up.
Right.
Never happened.
Or wished this is how they would have said and how they would have said it, laying the smack down in this really, No, I hear that for sure.
Yeah. It could
It's like the George Costanza jerk store thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
yeah. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with those responses. The vindictive, like angry part of me was like, "You go, girl," and then, in a manner of speaking, and then like the more nuanced thinking. Let me ask. So I actually agree with the internet here.
And they all did come back around. Almost every one of the threads at some point said, you really need to let your daughter find her relationship with her grandparents. Like, don't let your relationship with them color her opportunity. Like, if they truly are that horrendous, she'll know that and she'll cut off relations with them and stop wanting to do stuff with them. Anyway. Well, thank you both for another riveting debate and a glimpse into the collective conscious of the internet forums. Remember, morality is often shades of gray and not just black or white. And sometimes you can't even render a verdict.
Oh my gosh! When this one was really cringy from as the kids say from multiple perspectives. So I appreciate you bringing us something that really challenged us this morning.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, well. Please follow and share Veritas Views on any of the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And maybe your family as well, so they can get an insight into some of these things. And as always, stick around through the credits for whatever our bonus conversation will be.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's that bonus conversation.
Dan, I should ask you something. I don't know what I should ask you.
All right, I got something. So on my bookshelf is an unfortunately large number of books that I've never actually read.
Yes.
Yeah. My favorite one, I forget the exact title, but it's about teenagers, and it's like the title is something along the line of "I hate you, get out of my life, but would you please first take Cheryl and me to the mall?"
Okay.
Which I bought in part because I understand it's a really good book, and in part because I love the title, but I've never actually read it. So it's my favorite book that I've never read. Do you have a favorite book on your shelf that you've not actually read, but you bought because like this is a really cool book, and I really like it, but I never actually read it?
Number of books I haven't read yet.
I know.
Stack
I got
rolling.
far too many of them.
I'm vamping a little bit. I mean, I think the one
Michael can edit out the vamping. Michael, you can edit out the vamping.
The one I'm most excited to read that has been sitting on my shelf for an embarrassingly long period of time, but I think is going to be worth the read, is Robin Hanley Defoe's Stress Wisely. And it's all about the idea of stress isn't bad for you. It's how we handle stress. And, so we've gotten the wrong medical advice, get the stress out of your life. That's really important. But instead, how do you create resiliency so that you can weather stress? And actually then some of that can be positive for longer term health outcomes.
I love that. I should get that book on my shelf and not read it too.
And not read it. I could just I could visit you.
That's exactly it. Because people, when we're working with folks, they're sometimes they're coming in with, I'm depressed because of these things in my life. And yes, that's true. But often, like, the goal isn't to make those things in your life go away or to eliminate those things in your life. The goal is to build up the defenses that you have, because we're not going to be able to make those things go away, but if we cope better with them. And frequently, I've seen this, like depression can clear, anxiety can clear, marriage problems can clear, even if the underlying thing that seems to have caused those problems isn't any better. Right. Because they have learned how to cope with them. So I love that. I love that book, even though I've not read it either.
Right. No, that's great. It's about creating resilience and how do you teach resilience? And that really is kind of Dr. Hanley Defoe's whole gig, right? Is how do we create this resilience? And she's got this 5-factor model that's really wonderful. And she's actually an entertaining speaker. So if you get a chance to watch a YouTube clip of her, I really highly recommend it.
On the topic of resilience, I remember reading many years ago about resilience and what a child needs, or what a person needs to develop resilience when they're growing up in a really challenging or awful situation. And what at least this research that's now 25 years old, and based on my recollection of what I read 25 years ago was, you need one person. You need one person in your life who's there for you. It could be an uncle, a grandmother, a friend of a best friend's parent, whatever. There's someone in your life who's there and present and caring. It can create that resilience for a person, not 100% of the time, but that seemed to be the factor that was most potent in creating resilience in people who are in difficult situations, having someone
I would say Hanley Defoe would argue there's more, but check out the website to see what she says.
Nice plug for her. We no kickback here. Yeah, she didn't even know we were saying these good things.
All right. Well, again, I appreciate everyone and their listenership and support. This is just a gentle reminder that we are going to take a couple of weeks off here coming up soon. And while we appreciate your listenership for our season 1, we're cooking up some fun stuff for season 2. Stay tuned, but not before Dan and I get a little time out of the office. Dan?
Yeah. No, we're essentially shutting down. We will still be around if people make referrals. We'll still be around to respond to referral requests and things like that. We're taking off 2 weeks to spend time on ourselves and our families, and we'll be back fresh to work with folks in the new year, and we'll be back fresh to begin to reinvigorate the podcast in the new year.
In the meantime,
encourage you to do the same if you're able to do that.
Yeah. And in the meantime, we're going to drop some episodes at you. Our lovely podcast host who loves all things data is going to find out episodes that you haven't listened to, maybe you missed, and we're going to bring those to you in the break. Feel free to write us through that mailbag on the webpage so that we can have some fresh comments. Let us know what we missed in the episodes, or if there's content or a topic that you want us to dive into. There's a lot of stuff on this thread, so sometimes having a little bit of a direction to aim is really helpful. Let's make season 2 about what maybe interests our listening public.
And as we look back to season 1 in some of these, as Michael said earlier, or we'll say later, least loved, like, think of these as the deep cuts, the album gems that didn't become super popular, but were great songs, and for whatever reason didn't become the hit. But there's some of those deep tracks that are really great. So we're going to share with you again some deep tracks that we think are great, even if they didn't get the same listenership. So
the story I tell myself is, you jumped on the band when they were starting to get popular, but you missed the early stuff. So
we're going to show you the early stuff. All
right. So we've got one more fresh episode going to be coming your way before we take a break and send you some reruns.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.